Hello everyone, and I am welcoming you to part 5 in the Antichess tutorials series. I'm really enjoying making these videos as of lately. I'm getting a lot of good responses and a lot of positive feedback and a lot of suggestions for my videos, and it's all going really well. And some people have been telling me that it's been helping them, and some people have been saying that this could definitely help other people. So I'm all the more inspired and motivated to continue making these videos. For one thing, though, I did get a couple suggestions that I should make the videos a little bit shorter, and I totally get that. Like, not everyone has the time or the motivation to watch these things for 45 minutes. So I'm going to try to break them up a little smaller, maybe do a little smaller episodes. So that's what I'm going to be trying out today. So part 5 in this series, we're going to be looking at one concept in anti-chess that I feel like it's a really important concept in anti-chess that a lot of people don't figure out until probably like don't even realize that it's a thing until 1800 1900 level. And I definitely think it should be introduced to people early, so then you can start thinking about it and hopefully start implementing it into your gameplay. So let's just get started right into intermediates. The basic definition, the idea of the intermediate, is so that you're capturing less of your opponent's pieces, but it makes it so that your opponent has to capture several of your pieces, eventually going uncaptured. As you can see right now, this pawn is defending this piece right here, um, and my king sort of on its own. And although the black knight is attacking my king and the bishop is attacking this pawn, there's only two moves for white in this position. Reason being, for example, you might try something like, oh, I'm going to play h4, because black has a bunch of different captures, but this doesn't matter at all. Black can just capture, and after white pushes the pawn, you can just capture this pawn, and now white's left with one pawn versus a bishop and a knight, which could be winning for either side. More likely because you're going to promote onto a dark square. This is going to be winning for black in most cases. So h4 obviously isn't going to work. Something like h3 isn't going to work. Because of sort of the same thing, you advance the pawn, and then after you capture with the bishop, the pawn just keeps going forward. So none of these moves are going to work. You could try something like, I don't know, king g2, but then you just get and this is somewhat winning. Like it is winning for white, but it's a lot tougher to play. Like you've got to be really sure with your endgames. And in general, there's a mate in 3 here, so you might as well take it. The idea of an intermediate, as I said before, is to take some of your opponent's pieces, while your opponent takes more of your pieces and ends up undefended. So the idea here is rather king f2 or king e2. And the reason why we play king e2 after the bishop takes, although you're taking the knight, the bishop has one more capture than you. So the idea is to get your opponent to take exactly one more piece than you, or it might end up being more, but the main idea is so that your opponent captures an undefended piece of yours, on a move one higher than your own. And if that's a little bit confusing, just the basic concept is that, say black is attacking one of your pieces directly, and you know in 2 captures it will be undefended, then the idea is to look for a capture where you can capture once in the time it takes black to capture two times. In this case, either king f2 or king e2 works, because during this first capture where you would have to capture back, the king goes off and captures on e3 here, which forces the bishop to capture again. So this is the idea of an intermediate, and I feel like this is definitely a concept that brings people very high up in strength. If you see, I would honestly say like a large majority of the games that higher level players beat lower level players with is just because they find an intermediate that the lower level players are like, why, like how did they do that? And it's just because higher level players have seen this tactic more often. They're more used to it. But anyways, the idea of this video is just to get you sort of in the mode and seeing some of this. This is a position we're going to look at later. I should have a different thing up. But I'm getting all of these positions from my Antichess Puzzle Encyclopedia, which is on Lichess. I will link it in the description if you're curious. There, I think I have 36 or so studies in here, ranging all the way from the very beginner level to the very, very top level, like some puzzles that I certainly were not able to solve first time around. And almost all of them come from my games. I would say 90% of them come from my games. But anyways, let's look right here. So black is attacking our knight, and obviously we're gonna have to recapture rather with the rook or the king. But as you're also looking at this, after the rook captures this knight down here, after a second capture, the rook is after the second capture, nothing is defending this piece, so you will not have to capture back. So if we look at this and we say, okay, in two captures, I will not have to capture back any of black's pieces. Is there any piece that I can take in one capture? Oh, there is. There's this wonderful c6 pawn here. Maybe I can attack that. So the idea here is after rook c3, black will have to capture these two pieces in the time that you simply capture one piece right here, like this. And now black will end up on undefended square. Your rook is now, because it just took one piece, that's all it is, and now black is also set up for several more captures. So that's the first sort of idea. But this works more than just pieces. We've seen it with the king. We've seen it with the rook, and again, this works with all sort of pieces. It's just about how many captures you're making. Here, black could be quite content, as you've learned in other endgame videos and stuff. It's important to have major pieces. It's important to have space control, and black is dominating in all these aspects right now. Black could play something like king d6, and after bishop takes, rook takes, could win this winning endgame here because of all the major pieces, because of the space control, and because of the lack of development of white. But here, there's an important, I shouldn't say important, but there's an idea here that wins the game on the spot for black. And the idea sort of goes along with, we know, like, once again, that this white bishop is attacking one of our pieces, and in exactly two captures this way or two captures the other way, so here the piece is going to be undefended. So once again, the idea is, can we capture in less time? Can we capture exactly one less time? Can we capture once in the time that black captures two pieces? The important thing here, and it doesn't show up in this situation, is that there's no capturing twice, because we want to make sure that we don't have to capture twice in this situation, because after the third capture from black, you're going to have to capture back. So the idea is you just want to take one piece here, and in this position now would be bishop b7. You're attacking this rook once, and white is going to have to capture twice in that time. So after bishop takes e6 and bishop takes h1, now no matter which way white takes, white is going to be stranded on the black side of the board. And so that's the idea with the bishop. Moving on, we've got this other puzzle. And this is what I call, there are several different types of intermediates. Most people just refer to them all as intermediates. I have sort of names for them just for me to clarify what they are, and maybe you'll enjoy these names. I call this a waterfall intermediate. The main idea of it is that this intermediate allows, for example, we're defending this piece right now. And the idea of a waterfall intermediate is to get the bishop to capture twice, so then the rook can undefend it when it has to come down and capture here. So basically, it is the same idea as an intermediate. You are capturing, you want to force white or your opponent to capture a piece that will be undefended. But the idea is to make that happen by opening up for one of your pieces that is defending it. So in this case, if we want to get white to capture twice to open up our rook, we need one undefended capture. And in this case, the only winning move for black is rook to a1. The idea now being, after the bishop captures here, you capture one undefended piece, and after white moves out of the way, now you can open up here. I think everything pretty much wins here. It might get a little laggy for a second, but yeah, in this case, the only thing black can do wrong is capture on g8. Obviously, if you capture on g8, then white just moves the knight, something like that. But say you do something like you capture here, then all of a sudden, after white captures, then you have this nice capture here, and no matter which way white captures, say you capture here, then black just follows with the capture, and you're winning once again. Um, and so yeah, I'm just gonna fix that because I sort of messed up the puzzle a little bit. Um, but yeah, that's the idea. Is we capture once. We capture one undefended piece to open up for another one of our pieces, and that's what I call a waterfall intermediate. Um, and these are a little bit less common than normal intermediates, but they sort of have the same idea where you're capturing an undefended piece so that so then you can force your opponent to have a piece stuck in your end. Moving on, this is a little bit of a more difficult one, but I'm sure you'll be interested to see it. In this case, we have the white bishop threatening this piece, but if we look at it in exactly three captures, one, two, three, um, uh, in exactly three captures, white's going to end up on a square down here. That doesn't work out. So if white's going to capture three of our pieces, we want our third capture to be, so after white takes once, we take a piece, white takes second, we take another undefended piece, and then after white takes a third time, then we want to capture a defended piece. So we need, if white's going to capture three times, we need to capture two undefended pieces first. In this case, the winning move would be queen c7, the idea being that after the bishop captures here, the first undefended piece that you capture is this rook. After the bishop captures, you can capture either the knight or the pawn. Idea being after you capture, then white still has to capture one more time. And after you take on f2 and king takes, now this bishop is stuck in your end, and you can make several moves in a row to win the game. And so that's another idea. So that this sort of slide was just showing that we've shown intermediates with several different pieces, and again, as long as you're capturing one less undefended piece than your opponent, or if you're capturing the amount of undefended pieces one less than the amount of pieces your opponent's capturing, then you can end up with your opponent having a piece in your end, while your opponent will have to recapture your piece. And I just wanted to show an example of when some of these might really come up in a game. In one example that we actually went over last episode in the ideas that we were going over, losing openings, is one idea of a waterfall. A waterfall intermediate is when your opponent plays e4 after b5 takes. The idea here is knight f6, as we went over, and the reason being is because after you capture here, this knight now captures one undefended piece, and after the bishop captures rather the king or the bishop, this is a waterfall intermediate, as now it opens up your queen down here. And so that's just one example. But these do show up in games all the time. Like there's probably an opportunity in most gameplay 2000 and under, you'll have an opportunity for an intermediate every single game. Um, and actually another idea, I didn't have this planned, but I just thought of it, is we went over why this wasn't a very good opening, but the reason it survives, bishop b7, the suicide defense, is actually a waterfall intermediate in itself, because after the capture down here and taking the king, this opens up for your queen to come down and take. However, it doesn't end up working out, obviously, because you lose your king for nothing, and although this piece is on your opponent's side, there's just too many defended squares. So, but that's the reason it doesn't lose like immediately, is because of the idea of a waterfall intermediate. But moving on, the last intermediate, or the last type of intermediate I want to go over, is what's called a discovered intermediate. And the idea is you're opening up for one of your pieces to make an intermediate. In this case, knight h3 is the discovered intermediate, because this will force your opponent to capture four pieces right here, and it opens up for your rook to attack these two pieces right here. And because if you move this pawn, obviously you're losing, or you're not losing, it's just like, yeah, you just have to recapture, you're not winning. If you move either of these pieces, same thing. And if you try something like knight e2, the same thing doesn't work, because after you capture the king, and your their rook captures, your rook captures, you've still got a knight that will have to capture next move. And so the idea here is knight h3. So then after your opponent starts to capture your pieces, this just brings up an intermediate right here, right? Like your opponent's attacking one of your defended pieces, and you know that in exactly 2 captures it will be undefended. It will be undefended in 3 and 4. So if you capture 2 undefended pieces, then your opponent's still going to have more captures to go. And so after we see these captures right here, white is going to be winning, of course, after this discovered intermediate. And so I wanted to put one more real game idea here. This is a puzzle to end the video, and if you want to pause the video, this is a great time to do so. It's always a great time to do so, just for thinking. But in the spirit of Agad Mater, this is my time to get a nice drink of water. Lovely. Okay, for those of you who are able to do it, amazing job. You start by capturing here, and this opens up your opponent's rook. Now your opponent's rook is attacking one of your defended pieces. However, in either way it takes next, it will capture an undefended piece after 2 moves. So the correct move here is bishop c3, because after taking on h2 and taking on g7, now your opponent has to capture an undefended piece. Say here, another important move in this position is simply bishop f6. The point being is before the rook could capture, and after you recapture, you're taking the knight down here. But if black tries this now, then the knight has to come out and capture, and this is game over for black. White will be victorious. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Going over intermediates, it's such an important part of the game. You see it at every single level of the game, except for the more lower levels. But I feel like this idea and this concept is something that definitely will enhance your game. And will make you a better anti-chess player. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Stay tuned for more parts in this anti-chess tutorial series. And otherwise, thank you and bye-bye.